Hi there guys, this is Max from makeitconscious.com. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the final habit in the 7 habits of individuation. Habit 7 is meditate daily. Now, if habit 1, take responsibility for your mind, is the foundation of the 7 habits, then habit 7, meditate daily, is kind of like the pinnacle of the 7 habits. This is really where the practice really all comes together. I'm going to start out by talking about what meditation actually is, what it does, and how we understand meditation in the context of Carl Jung's model of the mind. Now, similarly to many of the habits in this sequence, Carl Jung didn't discuss the practice that much, that explicitly, or emphasize it much. Jung himself was more concerned with the understanding of the mind and the therapeutic prescriptions that bolt onto that. However, as part of the path of becoming a highly integrated person and attaining to individuation, the mental discipline that we discuss and the conduct we discuss, as well as the understanding, are all absolutely essential. Just like with mindfulness, one would not be able to actively work towards integrating their mind unless they had awareness of mind and present moment awareness. Likewise with meditation, one would not really be able to do that deep inner work on their own mind unless they had a practice of meditation. Now, with that in mind, let's explain what we actually mean by meditation, because there are many different definitions. If you ask different people, you'll always often get a different explanation of what meditation is and does. Here's how we think about it in the context of the 7 habits. Meditation is a dedicated training session for the mind. It is when you are devoting your entire intention and focus in that moment to doing nothing but training the mind. And training the mind means essentially to practice the full 7 habits. So within that, we're also practicing mindfulness. Within meditation, we're being aware of the mind. We're also practicing habit 5. We're also abandoning unwholesome and suffering states of mind, and we're cultivating wholesome states of mind. So we're really bringing it all together. This is how meditation differentiates from mindfulness. When we're doing meditation, we are practicing mindfulness. But when we're practicing mindfulness, we're not necessarily practicing meditation, because mindfulness is something we can do anywhere we are, and it's something we aim to do all day, every day, as part of these 7 habits. However, during meditation, this is when we are devoting ourselves fully to a dedicated, independent training session for the mind. What meditation does is it straightens out the mind, or to bring this back to Jung's model, it unifies the mind. If you've ever attempted to meditate, I'm sure one thing you've noticed is that more or less the moment you sit down, especially if you're new to it, the mind starts kicking up all kinds of unconscious contents. There's thoughts, there's ideas, there's plans, there's memories from the past. Put simply, this is the unconscious just doing its thing. These are just thoughts that are emerging under certain conditions. And of course, just like we are not conscious of every little aspect of our body at any one moment in time, there's so much of the psyche, in fact the vast majority of the psyche is outside the realms of consciousness at any one moment. So there's like a whole autonomous set of inclinations and wills happening at any one time in the unconscious. And of course, naturally, when we quieten down our conditions and we actually take the time to sit down and allow things to unfold, a lot of these are going to start coming to the surface. And so if you've ever thought, I tried meditating, but I wasn't very good at it, I just kept thinking and I found it very difficult to stop thinking, trust me, you haven't done anything wrong. The fact that thoughts are arising is very much the reason why we meditate, because it just shows us that there is a lot going on in the unconscious, and when we're actually not conscious of it, when they are hidden from our consciousness, then all these little big and small inclinations, they're acting on us in some way. We're just not conscious of it. So the habit of having a dedicated training session for the mind is important for much the same reason that, let's use an analogy. Say you were a weightlifting athlete, you're a competitive weightlifter. Well, if you spend your days doing things that involve lifting heavy objects, you're going to get stronger. Like, let's say that you work on a building site, and not only any old building site, but you're carrying around 50 kilogram concrete balls, like they're doing strongman competitions, and you're moving these big heavy things around. Clearly, you're going to get stronger doing that. But if you want to compete lifting 300, 400 kilogram barbells off the ground, then your training has to consist of lifting 300 and 400 kilogram barbells off the ground. And not only that, but if you were to train in that way, what happens to your day job? It gets a lot easier. And this is kind of like an analogy for what we do in daily life and then what we do in meditation. What we're doing in daily life, of course, is we're putting together all the habits, and we are practicing mindfulness and maintaining that present moment awareness that allows us to make wholesome decisions and with good outcomes. And we're monitoring our minds, and we're doing things that lead to a more beautiful and wholesome state of mind. However, if that was all we were to do, and we weren't to ever train the mind, such as what we do in meditation, our state of mind is never going to be quite as sharp. We're never going to be quite as unified as we are by practicing meditation on a daily basis. There's always going to be certain things in the unconscious that are pulling at us moment to moment, and because we haven't given it that dedicated focus, there's going to be a lot more that's governing our thoughts and feelings at any moment. So whilst all of the habits contribute to this ambition of making the unconscious conscious, and certainly the practices Jung deployed, such as shadow work and active imagination and all of his Jungian therapeutic practices, all of these things work to make it conscious. They're all bringing unconscious content forth, and thus unifying the mind and bringing it back into wholeness and unity. And this then gives the practitioner more control over their mind, more peace, because they're not being pulled in all these different directions. They're pursuing any goals with congruency, and they're not being tormented by just a preponderance of distractions and temptations and desires. Not to mention aversions and projections. This is all coming forth in all of these habits. However, there is, I feel, a qualitative difference when we start talking about meditation. And I think one of the primary benefits of meditation is that it shows us something. It isn't just a way of calming the mind, because that is part of it, of course, and that is incredibly useful. But what meditation allows us to do is access a source of deep peace and joy that is just simply not possible to achieve without meditation. And if it is attained in daily life, it is very rare. It is unreliably attained, and typically only attained in daily life by people who also meditate and have been meditating. So another thing about meditation is that after a deep practice, it tends to carry with you. You tend to bring those benefits then into daily life. It then becomes a lot easier to be mindful. Think the weightlifter analogy. After months and months of training in the gym, lifting bricks around at work is suddenly a lot easier. And it's kind of like what's going on with meditation here. So aside from anything else, meditation gives us that insight into what deep freedom and peace really feels like. And it gives us the confidence that we can go back there whenever we need to, without the need for external stimuli, without reliance on certain foods or substances or situations in life. It shows us that there is a source of joy and peace that is possible without the need for sense desire, without the need for external stimulation, or to rely on things outside of us other than our own mind, body, and our breath. With daily practice, it is certainly possible to get a taste of this and come to a point where you realise, first of all, just how much of your daily movements, your daily decisions, and the way we behave day to day is driven by a kind of low-level craving and aversion. And if we don't meditate, we don't have that realization. It's hard to see what's really driving our motivations moment to moment. When we have a deep meditation, for example, we might come out of it and then go, wow, I didn't realize actually just how much of my movements were compelled by a kind of low-level suffering. And having then let go of that and stepped out of it, we start to see the way things really are. You know, we start to see that actually the problem was never outside of me. The problem was not that I, didn't get what I wanted. It was the fact that I saw something outside of me as something I needed in the first place. It was because I wasn't whole. It was because as a result of that, I was craving something or I was pushing something away. And that was the issue. It wasn't the outside world. And so it gives us the confidence to be able to come back to there. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to instantly muster that at all times, but it does give us that insight, and it shows us so much about how the mind works, which is something that is near impossible to achieve in daily life alone. Of course, insights will come in daily life, but they are very much aided by the meditation practice that then feeds into daily life. So, like with all 7 other habits, there are 3 key facets to this particular habit that I'm going to share with you now, and these are some very helpful things to bear in mind as you go about your daily meditation practice. Although I wouldn't encourage you to bear them in mind whilst you meditate. The whole point of meditation really is to let go of things. And so with that in mind, the first facet I'm going to talk about here is just that. It's that words about meditation are just words and they can guide us, but it's really all in the practice. So the first facet here is simply just practice. The most useful word I can share with you is practice. Practice, practice, practice. And if people were to ask me what single piece of, I don't want to say advice, because it's not advice, but what is one thing I would share with every other person in the world, like a generic piece of guidance? Not that anyone has asked me that, but if they did, I think it's a useful thing to think about. And what I would share would be, get 1,000 to 2,000 hours of meditation practice under your belt. Just do it. Just commit to doing that much. That's half an hour to an hour a day for several years. I'm not looking to set any expectations here as to what someone should have experienced by that point or how their meditation should be going. Like with any skill, it takes hundreds, if not thousands of hours to become familiar with it, really. The 10,000 hour rule is something that's often talked about when developing skills, but that's to become world-class at something. I personally feel that if a person was to dedicate 1,000 to maybe 2,000 hours of meditation practice, they're going to experience some results. And I think they're going to experience enough of a shift that they can then decide for themselves from there on in to what extent they would like to carry on. I suspect that they will carry on. Like I said, I think meditation is unlike any other activity we do. It's not even entirely accurate to refer to it as a skill. It's more of a practice and a process whereby we're allowing contents to come into consciousness and then we are doing something skillful with them. So in that sense, there's a bit of skill, and it is something that you tend to become more familiar with, and obviously the benefits start to accumulate and the experience starts to evolve. But it may not be most accurate to think of it as a skill exactly, because we're not trying to better ourselves in any way. If anything, we're actually just showing ourselves more and more the nature of things, the nature of reality. We're showing ourselves that we don't control the thoughts that come into our head exactly. Like, we see them arise and we can understand how they've arisen, and we can see that the decisions we've made in the past have contributed to that and how they've contributed. But all of that is just insight. It's not really us getting better at any particular skill. Another reason I would stipulate this amount of time, 1,000 or 2,000 hours, on one hand, it takes the edge off the need to be concerned about how much time one is committing. Let me rephrase that a little bit. If we just give ourselves an arbitrary number of hours to meditate, we say, I'm just going to do it for half an hour a day, and I'm going to keep doing it until who knows what my future self is going to decide, right? We sort of give ourselves an out there, and maybe there's even a little bit of concern in our mind about, well, is this really worth it? How much time am I using here? Couldn't I be using this time to do other things? Couldn't I be checking Facebook or something? Because in those early days of meditating, the practitioner doesn't know yet what the true benefits of meditation are. That 2,000 hours stipulation is kind of like saying, just write that off. Just write that off. Just commit and say, worst case scenario, I'm going to spend 2,000 hours doing something that I could have spent doing something else. In terms of my overall lifetime, it's not a huge loss. But if this goes well, and if I experience the benefits, people seem to think that this is one of the most wonderful things that a person can do. Is it not worth just exploring what that's about? And so I really think giving it that amount of dedication is a pretty good trade-off. It's a pretty good cost-benefit ratio. So that's what I would suggest. In regards to that concern about meditation being a valuable use of time or not, this is another thing that meditation can really teach us. It's that there isn't really such a thing as running out of time, because time is an idea. Time is how we conceive of cause and effect, really. And so it doesn't really make sense to say, I don't have enough time. What meditation shows us invariably is that it's not our time that's the issue, it's our focus. It's what we're focusing on. And misuse of focus is, in a sense, what causes us challenges. So in a sense, time isn't really a resource, nor is it a resource that we are hindered by. It's more accurately to say that our only real resource is our capacity to be present. And meditation not only practices that, but shows us that firsthand. So we can't really say we don't have enough time to do meditation. All we can really say is that our unconscious is driving us in other directions, and maybe we're concocting a narrative about that, but really it's not our lack of time, it's our lack of ability to be with what is right now. So that first tip is very simple, it's just practice. And if you were to take away nothing else, I hope you do take more from this, but if you weren't to take anything else from this, the most useful word anyone can possibly say about meditation is practice, and the second most useful word is just. So just practice. So the second facet I'm going to discuss here is find the middle. So here's a bit more of a practical tip here. What do you mean by find the middle? Well, usually our mind is not in the middle. It's either too restless or too lethargic, or it's craving for something, it wants to go towards something, or it's feeling anger and aversion, it's trying to push something away. Really what we're doing here is we're working to integrate the opposites. Again, this is a Jungian idea. This is about bringing the mind back into wholeness, into unity. And so as we meditate, we want to be finding that middle. Now, as you practice, you get a better feel for what this actually is like during meditation, what this means. But to relay some examples, one thing we can try, one thing I find very useful, is to play around with the amount of effort you apply. Generally speaking, it doesn't require a lot of effort. Like, meditation shouldn't be exhausting, but that said, it does take effort. We are applying habit 5, manage your state. We are applying energy to direct the mind. One thing we can simply try here is to move between these two extremes. We can try exerting the mind to really focus on that breath, like cover the breath entirely with your attention, even if it's just for one breath or even half a breath. Like, just commit to focusing entirely on the breath for a moment. See what happens. And then if that doesn't work, try the opposite. Let go entirely. Just let the mind do whatever it wants to do. Now, those, of course, are two extremes. And then what we do is we bring it into the middle. So we try really hard, we then let go completely, and we can just, with decreasing kind of extremeness on each side, just bring that attention to the middle, bring the effort to the middle, and eventually you'll find the mind just locks in the present moment. So just try that. Just try experimenting with the amount of effort. If we're stuck, that's often, I find, quite a useful way to let the meditation go deeper. This same concept applies, of course, in things like how energetic we feel. If the mind feels really restless, we can consciously calm it down, and maybe even breathe a bit slower, but generally you don't want to be controlling our breathing. We're just setting that intention to calm the body. Likewise, if the mind is very sluggish and lethargic, we can consciously exert the mind and apply a bit more energy to our practice. So in all aspects here, we're just really trying to find that middle. Now I'm going to talk about facet 3 of habit 7, and that is to mix it up. So what we mean by this is not just simply do the same meditation every day or the same pose in the same place at the same time, but to actually mix it up, to try different times of day, different lengths of time, different poses. We can do walking, standing, sitting, of course, and lying. We can do different styles of meditation. We can do our basic meditation where we just do mindfulness meditation, focus on the breath, and apply habit 5, manage our state to bring the attention back. We can also do loving kindness meditation. We can do this when we feel that there's a lot of anger kicking around. We can actually cultivate loving kindness as an antidote to anger. We can also meditate in different environments. We can go outside. We can meditate in parks. We can meditate on the beach. We can meditate, in different rooms in our house. I think meditating in public is quite a good thing to try because it's not something you see many people do, certainly not here in Georgia. When I was in England in a town called Brighton, it was a bit more common to see people meditating. But even then, if you haven't meditated in public before, there can be a little bit of resistance there, like, well, what are people going to think of me? Is a dog going to come up and try and sit on me whilst I'm meditating? Okay, let's say a dog comes up. Just stick to the plan, stick to the breath, keep meditating. And this is all very useful ways of dealing with resistance. Basically, it's shining a light on the unconscious. It's making it conscious. And the more we make conscious, the more unified the mind becomes, the more close we come to a state of wholeness, the more peaceful the mind becomes, the more we reside in a beautiful state for more hours of the day, which ultimately is kind of the point. So I'd suggest mixing it up, try those different things, try different postures, different environments, all the things I mentioned. And this is a really great way to expand and improve the efficacy of one's practice. Again, we can kind of bring this back to the weightlifter analogy, because for that weightlifter to lift a 400 kilogram barbell off the ground, he's not only going to be lifting 400 kilogram barbells off the ground, he's going to be doing different rep ranges, different intensities. He's going to be mixing up the volume week to week. Some days he's going to do 12 sets with a lighter weight. Some weeks he'll do 3 sets with a much heavier weight. So he's just mixing it up all the time. And the same is very much the case for meditation. There's got to be consistency, and it does help to have a consistent place and a consistent time. Consistency is super important. See facet 1, just practice. But likewise, mixing it up is really powerful, so we should absolutely do that as well. So I'm going to round this video off by talking about how it comes full circle with meditation. It brings us back to insight. Like I discussed in habit 1, take responsibility for your mind. Habit 1 is really like the map. It's really like pointing us where to go, giving us a model that we can work with. But as the saying goes, the map is not the territory. Put simply, meditation puts us in touch with the territory. It shows us the truth of taking responsibility for one's mind. In other words, we take responsibility because it's useful and it has utility. What starts to occur with meditation and practicing the whole 7 habits is we start to see that taking responsibility is not merely an expedient practice. There's truth behind it. There is truth that on some level we are responsible. We are responsible for our well-being. On some level we're doing all this. And meditation actually, if practiced consistently and deeply, one day might just show you the reality of that. And I don't mean lead to an intellectual understanding. I mean, it is possible to have a full and profound direct experience of how one is creating their reality. And that's not something that's easy to convey in words. It's only something that can be experienced through deep practice, by practicing a path to individuation and by practicing deep meditation. That's an irreversible experience. Like once that is seen, you can't unsee it, and it does change one's perception of existence and reality entirely. It doesn't mean that one just stops suffering there and then and their mind immediately becomes whole and they never experience any discomfort again. No, not at all. But it does change the flavour of existence entirely. It does alter the course of events in such a way that even though one may forget that experience and then proceed to get lost in the vicissitudes of life, something has changed, and it comes back to 2 points I mentioned earlier, which were insight and confidence. So on some level one knows that they're doing this, and at the same time that in order to move back to a state of wholeness, all one really needs to do is meditate. And I think it comes with a sense of non-reliance on the external world. Like we can go around, we can enjoy all the experiences of life, we can enjoy a good meal, we can have fun with friends and so on. But it also knows that it doesn't need those things to be content, and that actually on some level it is just experiencing its own mind. And so it gives one that realization, which even if clouded over temporarily, nonetheless gives us the confidence to go back to that space, knowing that if push comes to shove, all we need to do is keep practicing 7 habits. They all lead to wholesome results, and sitting down and meditating is a reliable way to attain to wholeness and a beautiful state of mind without the need for the world to be a certain way to fulfill our wants and desires. And that is a superpower, if there ever was one. I think that's one of the most valuable little tools that a person can acquire and take with them for the rest of their life. Meditation really is the pinnacle of the practice. It really is where it all comes together. By dedicating yourself to it consistently, it can produce irreversible improvements to one's state of mind. So I would encourage you to do that in the manner I have shared in this video. So that's all for me, guys. I'll leave that there, and I shall talk to you soon.